When I killed people, I had a desire to kill more. I don't care whether they deserve to live or not. It is none of my concern. A twisted serial killer slaughtered dozens of people simply because he was bitter about a breakup. Yang Xinhai, China's most prolific serial killer, was born almost 55 years ago on July 29, 1968. But by the time he died, nearly 36 years on, he had gained the fearsome reputation as the monster killer. Although his murderous spree started in 1999, the turning point in Yang's life came earlier. Yang Xinhai, the fourth of 6 children, grew up in poverty in Hunan province. Despite being praised for his intellect and sincerity, he struggled socially and academically, burdened by his family's poverty. His initial hopes in high school were dashed by financial constraints and bullying due to his small stature and family's lack of resources. Frustration with his circumstances led to conflict with his father, and in 1985, at the age of 17, he dropped out of school. Yang refused to return home and began his wanderings around China, working as a piece worker. 3 years later, he had his first trouble with the law and was sent to a work camp for having committed a series of thefts in Hebei province. In 1992, 24-year-old Yang Xinhai met a girl and fell in love with her. But their tender happiness did not last long, as Yang was arrested for an attempted rape in his home village in 1996. His girlfriend claimed that whenever he was released, she would marry him. He ended up serving 3 years in prison. In 1999, following his release from prison, Yang found out that his now ex-girlfriend got married to someone else. Yang's girlfriend allegedly dumped him when she found out about his convictions for theft and attempted rape. Yang Xinhai was incredibly frustrated with this situation. He believed his ex-girlfriend was wasting his time and planned to publicly humiliate him from the start. During this time, something happened in Yang's mind. A lonely and beaten Yang Xinhai agonized with a growing hatred for people, and especially the women around him. His actions over the subsequent 4 years are thought to have been rooted in a desire to enact revenge on his ex-girlfriend and on society. Now 28 and full of hate, Yang Xinhai looked for ways to vent his anger. In his eyes, the world treated him unfairly. He was impoverished, humiliated, and bullied as a child. Further, he was unable to make a decent living, and he was publicly humiliated by his ex. Eventually, crossing the line between common thug and murderer, Yang Xinhai committed his first murders on September 19, 2000. The monster killer was born. Yang Xinhai was entering an elderly couple's home in Hunan province when the elderly couple's dog began to bark. In his distress, Yang Xinhai grabbed a brick and beat the elderly couple to death while they were sleeping. Yang Xinhai fled the scene after grabbing some money. The guilt that tormented him was tremendous. He was not able to sleep for several days. The sound of skulls being shattered, the smell of blood that filled the air, and their dying gasps haunted him daily. A tormented Yang Xinhai wandered the wilderness as if it was his home. He was able to survive as a nomad by stealing food from farms he came across. Yang Xinhai eventually went for Anhui province after laying low for a while. His inner impulse to kill others, on the other hand, would become more difficult to resist. On October 1, 2000, Yang Xinhai disguised himself as a laborer and wandered around Zhaoyong village, watching a little girl and her younger brother play hide and seek. The monster waited till night to make these 2 children his first victims. Yang Xinhai crept over the family's fence and into their home, where he beat their 63-year-old grandfather to death with an iron rod. Yang Xinhai turned his attention to the children after the grandfather died, killing both of them. Yang Xinhai raped the murdered 12-year-old girl after killing everyone in the house. The grandma discovered the family early the next morning. The monster had vanished by the time the cops arrived. Despite the fact that he had already killed 5 people, Yang Xinhai did not turn himself in. Yang Xinhai no longer felt sorry for his earlier crimes after fully embracing his inner demons. Indeed, his lack of regret was what drove him to perpetrate additional crimes. Killing had become a sport for him, and he felt amazing. Murder became a way for him to deal with his past traumas. Choosing to wander poor villages, Yang Xinhai targeted people that reminded him of his childhood or previous relationships, poor elderly villagers and women. Between 1999 and 2003, Yang committed 67 murders and 23 rapes, all with the same modus operandi. His methods were extremely cruel, and he didn't leave any survivors. More than a few families were exterminated by his hand. Yang would sneak into family homes at night, typically targeting farmers, and butcher the occupants with improvised weapons ranging from axes to shovels. He'd also sexually assault the occupants he desired. Yang Xinhai was almost forced to calm down after new murders in July 2002. SARS emerged in China around this period. Nonetheless, Yang was unconcerned. Xinhai went on a rampage during the fall and winter months, committing most of his atrocities in a short period of time. The local police were put under intense pressure to locate and apprehend Yang Xinhai. Around this time, major investigations were underway to track down the monster killer. Because several police agencies were cooperating, they began to suspect that these crimes were committed by the same person. This was difficult to prove because Yang was meticulous in his appearance. There was seldom any evidence left behind that would incriminate him outright. By the time of his arrest in November 2003, he was wanted in relation to homicides by authorities in 4 Chinese provinces. That said, he was essentially caught by accident. On November 2nd, the team investigating the monster killer received a tip. A guest in a hotel in Changzhou City was acting strangely. They walked aimlessly around the primary school near the hotel, and they didn't have an ID card to identify themselves. Police Director Liu Jian and 2 policemen pursued the suspect after determining that this was cause for investigation. It didn't take long for the suspect to notice the officers who were closely following him. Yang Xinhai was caught while fleeing Liu Jian and his men. Further investigation found that he was also carrying a folding knife. With each passing moment, Yang Xinhai became increasingly more suspicious to the officers. Eventually, the officers noticed Yang Xinhai spoke with a Hunan accent, an accent that the monster killer would share. Detaining Yang Xinhai, the officers brought him in for questioning. 3 days later, while waiting to question him, it was discovered that his blood sample matched the killer's blood sample exactly. As a result, the interrogation began soon after. After only 3 hours of interrogation, Yang Xinhai could not answer questions coherently and stared at the ceilings for long periods of time with tears filling his eyes. Yet, after several rounds of interrogation, Yang Xinhai finally admitted to the charges he was accused of. He smiled as he retold his murder and raping sprees. Yang Xinhai admitted that killing was just exciting. 3 months later, on February 1st, 2004, the Intermediate People's Court sentenced Yang Xinhai to death. With these heavy charges over his head, he rejected his right to appeal. 13 days later, on February 14th, he was taken to Luhai, Hunan, where he was executed by way of firing squad. After nearly 3 years of murdering people, the wandering monster killer was dead. According to some reports, Yang was driven to kill to take revenge against society, guilty of having negatively influenced his relationship with the girlfriend. Later, other newspapers declared that his actions were dictated by more macabre motives. Yang took a morbid pleasure in stealing, killing, and raping. Through this, Yang Xinhai is the most prolific known Chinese serial killer since the country's founding. Killing 67 people, he has forever left his mark in a grievous way. Although Yang has never really expressed the motivations that drove him to kill, there is an emblematic statement of his that helps us to understand the reason for his extreme and heinous acts. When I kill, I feel the desire to kill again. This drives me to kill. I don't care if my victims deserve to die or not. I don't give a damn. I have no desire to be part of society. Society is not my problem.